力手托天了，人来这边也来，这边也来。
他不怕，对，来了，对，他转了，哪儿转呢？
那里边，对。
这俩手是一个。你瞅我这脑袋，
你听着我跟你说。
哎。
Well, as you can see in the video, he's really impressive. And through some connection, I found a friend who knows someone in the Beijing Bagua Association, and they know of this old master. So I asked for introduction. So they sent someone to actually take me and my friend there. And here's a photo that I took after having over an hour talk with Grandmaster Tianfang. So just to show that I was there and I did exchange understanding with this Grandmaster. And obviously, the first thing I went there after, briefly explaining where I'm from and why I want to visit him, we got to the point where I want to experience this kind of magical power. And, I have to say that he does have some special quality of body mechanic that, I have not experienced at the time from other people that does external martial arts. Okay, for example, when I'm, pushing his chest, it feels like my hand goes into his chest without his body actually moving. And after that point, I can push him very hard, but his body does not even move. It doesn't even shake or have a resistance tug of war with my hand. It just feels like he's immovable. And then he offered me his arm. I grabbed his arm, and as he reached that kind of state of quality, I feel like my finger squeezed into his arm. Like his arm become thinner than initially. But obviously his arm actually, the form doesn't change. So what actually I experienced was my force being absorbed into his body. This still sounds a little weird. And after that point, he asked me to pull him, and I can't pull him off his chair. He was impossible to be put off the chair. I was able to move the chair, but I can't pull him off the chair. So, and you can see he's very scrawny old man in 96, 96 years old, and he's like probably weigh half my weight or something. Not half, but he definitely weighs less and has less strength. But I couldn't do those things to him. However, when I asked him to bounce me like he did in that video, right, he couldn't. And this is where I realized something is not right. Obviously, he's not fake, right? He's real, and for his age, he demonstrated some very impressive internal qualities, but he could not bounce me like he did in the video with his student. So that gave me an interesting question to ponder upon. So I wanted to learn from him to better understand the whole thing. Obviously, he couldn't do it, he's too old. So after that, I went to visit other Qi masters that I can find in Beijing. Those ones, I'm not going to mention names because most of them are still alive today, and I don't want to, ruin the reputation. Because, I still have to go back to the Beijing martial community, so I don't want to piss off everyone over there. Now, I talked about Tianfang because he already passed away, and also, he does have genuine skill, so I'm not saying bad things about him. It's just that the bouncing part, it didn't happen to me. With some of these other Qi masters that I went to, nothing happened. Not only does they cannot bounce me, they can't even show any qualities that I experienced from Tianfang. So it's up to that point that I realized that something is amiss, right? Is that this reaction that students get is not happening to me at all. So either something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with that force. Eventually, I found my current Tai Chi master, which is a disciple of Shi Ming, and Shi Ming is very famous for no-touch telekinesis-like power. Right? He demonstrated on the video that was filmed by a French documentary crew, and that went viral overseas. And he's labeled one of the greatest Qi masters of our time. And on the opposite camp, he's called one of the biggest Wu masters of all time. So either way, I studied under one of his main disciples up until today. And the first day I went to the master, before I became a disciple, asking about Shi Ming's Ling Kong Li, or the empty force and the no-touch force, and he told me that it's just a game. It doesn't work in reality. It's not for self-defense. It's not for combat. It's a game just the master played with students. And I got to admit that at the point I felt a bit let down because I was expecting to learn some superpower, and after that I can be like Jedi Knight. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Star Wars, but just to put stuff in context, I want to be able to move people without touching them. So when he told me that it was just a game between master and students, I feel a little disappointed. And I thought to myself, maybe he just don't want to admit he has this kind of no-touch Ling Kong empty force to an outsider. And since, I was running out of options, I decided to join him anyway, right? And he was also recommended by someone. Now, I've gone through this encounter in detail in my other video on when I was talking about my Grandmaster Shiming, so I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here. If you're interested, check out that video about the encounter. So the thing is, after 2 weeks of training with my master every day, he finally allowed me to experience the kind of force he has, and to me that was a huge expectation because I was training under him for a full day for 2 weeks without even knowing what I'm actually getting myself into. I kind of just took a leap of faith. And while what he was demonstrating on me was not the no-touch empty force, it was still very impressive nonetheless, because given our size and weight difference and my previous training in Yiquan, I was fairly confident that I can overpower him. But upon trying non-compliant push hand, I was unable to overpower him or come on top with our push hand exchange. And while he doesn't do no touch stuff or chi stuff to me, he was able to bounce me backwards. But of course, because I was actually giving him enough force and my body was in a sort of frame that he was able to bounce me, right? It's not like what the other chi masters are doing. And that's when I realized that, my master and as well as this, Grandmaster Shiming's line of Taiji lineage doesn't just have this, chi empty force that my master described as, just a play between master and student. They actually have genuine abilities that affect everyone. Very similar to what I experienced with Tianfang, but more profound. Maybe it's because Tianfang was really old and my master was still kind of in his prime at the time, so he was able to demonstrate these forces better. So I stood up to study under him, and I studied under him ever since 98 until now. And the more I studied under him, the more I was exposed to this kind of chi phenomenon, because others, my Taiji brothers and sisters, some of them, when they go to my master, they can almost feel that force before they touch him. And some of them, does very exaggerated motion, even with very minimal movement from my master. But whenever I, do so with my master actually have to do a slight bigger movement. I don't mean like, massive big movement, but he will have to do something. He can't just hold his frame and just think about it and then, I move out or fall out. That has never ever happened to me, but I have observed this happen with other people. And I've also, mingled a bit with other disciples of Shiming and seen similar things that, a lot of things happens with their own students, right? And happen with my own Taiji brothers when they go test. But the moment I go and, I was like, wow, this is interesting, let me try it, and nothing happens. And it's very awkward, right? So at some point, they start to think, maybe my master sent me on purposely to make them lose face. So eventually I had to stop, voluntarily go and experience these things. I have to stand there and look innocent, and hopefully they offer to try it out with me, and then I can go without making my master look like he's conspiring against them. So my point is, from my years and years of experience and looking for the chi power, I can say with pretty much certainty, at least from my perspective, that chi power doesn't work on everyone. It only works on people who are sensitive, which suggests that this is not really an actual measurable force. It's more like either a subliminal suggestion or kind of a neural stimulation that only certain people picks up. So while it's not, maybe it's not exactly that, but the way I understand it and from my experience, almost like certain animals can sense danger, right? And if someone has an ill intent on certain animals, the animals would back up before this person would attack them. With this person or animal, right? So the animal can sense danger. And I believe that through training, they hone their senses and the neurons and nerves to pick up this kind of subtle changes in the master, that the moment the master's intention does something, they picks it up. So it's almost like someone who has been through a lot of battle back in the days will be able to walk on the street and sense danger when someone tries to attack them. It's almost like that. Or like this one time where I went to a crocodile farm near Cape Town. And as I went there, they were busy feeding the crocodile. There was a worker there. And one crocodile was out of line, and this worker did some gesture, and the crocodile just ran the other way as fast as he could, running for his life. Now obviously these are grown crocodiles, so any one of them could easily kill that man if they, attacked him. But none of them did. Instead, they are very scared of this man. And what this suggests is that they've been mentally conditioned to fear this man and the certain gesture that he does since they were babies. And because of that, even though that in reality the man can't threaten them at all, in their mind they believe the threat is true and therefore they run for their life instead of killing the man. So I'm not saying that these chi masters are beating on their students to form this kind of response, that's not what I'm saying. But you can see how a similar mental response could be taught and trained with their student. And this kind of training could either come through validation, like you join this chi master, everyone else is bouncing. If you don't bounce, you kind of not fit in. So it's like validation, peer pressure, the people who, goes out their way and wanting to be able to bounce. So there are many reasons to why this can be taught to a student. But as you can see, it can be interpreted as more of a mental conditioning than a physical force. So yes, it is definitely true to the people who are sensitive to this kind of phenomenon and are experiencing it firsthand. But the fact that it doesn't apply to everyone, right? There are people who are completely immune to it, would suggest that this is not a real force. A real force should apply to everything equally. And furthermore, it cannot be a value on the martial ability of Tai Chi or any other internal martial art, because the martial value comes in from you able to defend anyone who's trying to attack you, and if the guy isn't sensitive, the kind of thing does not work. And what is the point of type of power that only work on selected individuals and not on everyone? From a martial perspective, there's no point. Now, I've also explained in my previous videos on Tai Chi that this kind of training does have its merit, right? The more sensitive you are, the easier it is for you to pick up someone's intention when you're in a close range, whether it's push hand or clinch position. You're able to tell what the opponents are about to do easier and earlier than other people. So it does have some value in that regard. But that's more in the sense of the student who's being more sensitive to the kind of things, rather than the master who's able to send a student flying with minimal movement or no touch. So this has been my experience on my quest to find this chi power, and to my disappointment, I discovered that this isn't as what I thought it was. And if my story isn't convincing enough, let's look at a public story, right? So here's a video of one of perhaps the most infamous cases of a chi master being exposed in recent history in China. So the person in question here is called Yan Fang. She's a disciple of Li Jingwu. Li Jingwu was one of the very high-level and highly recognized Tai Chi masters in Beijing during the Republic era, one of the 4 tigers of Tai Chi back then. He first studied in the Wu family, then was studying under Chen Fa-ke, and eventually studied under Hu Yaozhen, Xin Yi Liu He. And then toward the later part of his life, he invented Zhen Wu Tai Chi, named after himself. And this Yan Fang is basically an Indo disciple of Li Jingwu. And here's a demo of what he does with his students. So this particular demo went viral when one of her students posted this on the internet. And suddenly, I don't know why this one went viral, because before her, this already Grandmaster Shiming and as well as many others. For some odd reason, she's the one that went viral. And because of that, a reporter from various TV stations actually went to interview her. And one particular, reporter offered to experience this magical force. So he stood there, and she, was trying to apply her magical power to this reporter, and nothing happened. And I'm going to show you a video of that documented in real time.
是一个船长。
从画面中我们可以看到，严方一掌按在第一个人的胸口，随后后面的几位弟子陆续弹出，但前面的2个人纹丝没动。随后记者上场体验。
放松就可以。
好，放松。
我只打你这儿。
是后面那人飞出去，不是我飞出去的。
你绝对不会，我借用你传导过去。当传导的时候呢，你感觉在我的掌上，你要送过去是什么意思？好。他们为什么出去了？好。他们手现在施在你什么地方？好不好？好。改到这儿啊，感觉到这地方怎么出去的力？
随后记者变换了位置，由对手变到队尾，想体验是否自己也能感受到力量被弹飞出去。但遗憾的是，这个真没有。
记住吧，我就用力记住吧。
对。放松，你把这松了，你把这松的力是全部出屁。
And as you can see, the student that's standing behind the report is all flying backwards exaggeratedly, but the report is not feeling anything. I mean, she can't even push the reporter back, 1 or 2 steps, and that just shows that she's not actually using any physical force, and she's definitely trying to, to invoke her chi power. But despite the fact that the students are all reacting to this power, the reporter is not. And because of this, Sun just basically turned her into overnight infamous Qi master, and everyone started to criticize her, and eventually led to she being expelled from the Wushu Federation and was expelled from her own system and all of that. But I gotta say, she just was unlucky and had a bad. She's not only one that is, doing this type of power, but she is one of the many that must interpret what this phenomenon is, right? She actually really thinks she gains superpower and she can move people, with her Qi. Whereas in actual fact, she just have a bunch of students that are sensitive to the type of signal that she's giving off. So while she's not the only one that practice this kind of phenomenon, she was one of the few that are dumb enough to try to prove it to the public, right? Other people, they just market this to people who believe it, can feel it, and make a lot of cash, and never put themselves up to the test. So for all the Adam Misner fans out there, stop coming and arguing with me. If you really think Adam Misner can do that kind of ability to everyone, then you know what? There's a guy in Australia called Stuart Shaw who has been wanting to touch hands with Adam for more than 10 years, as far as I can tell. And and they're from the same country, so there should be not much of issue for them to meet up. And if Adam can prove on Stuart Shaw in a resistant scenario that that his phenomena do apply to everyone, then I'll believe it too. But until that day, I have my doubt. And again, let me just clarify. I don't say he's completely fraud or he's fake. He has real body mechanics. He just disguising it as something else, as cheap power. And some of his demos only works on his students. That part I've already covered in my last video, so I'm not going to go into this here. So my point is, if there's anyone out there who believes they chi master, their own master who has chi power, affects everyone regardless whether they're sensitive to it or not, then let's prove it, right? You can go to Stuart Shaw or other non-believers in your local town, at least someone who knows what's going on, right? Don't prey on someone who's uninitiated, right? Go against someone who does physical push hand and see if whatever you do works. Talking about Stuart Shaw, there's another interesting incident that is worth to take note of. So there's a Tai Chi master in Australia who had videos where he was able to demonstrate similar phenomena, not touch stuff, but stuff that you can see he's not actually exerting any physical force, and the student is falling left, right, and center. I'm going to show a quick video here of what I'm talking about.
Leave it plugged in, and then I can actually do the work and do the arm, for example, this. Yeah. Once I pull it out, now I'm in control.
And basically what happened was Stuart Shaw called him out to be a fraud, and then he invited Stuart Shaw to touch hands with him to show him real Tai Chi power. And and probably he didn't expect Stuart Shaw to really take him up on the offer, and they met up in Sydney in a park, and they had a non-compliant push hand bout or duel. And basically to people's surprises, none of his demonstrated chi power or that kind of ability worked on Stuart Shaw. It doesn't work against someone who knows how to push hand and has sufficient body weight and strength to counter his physical force. And over here you can see a video that was taken on the day where Stuart Shaw met his Chi master. And as you can see, that none of the previous quality that you see from his individual video on his students happened against Stuart Shaw. And in the end, they resulted to brute force pushing, and because he has less physical strength and less weight, he's being uprooted all the time and being pushed back by Stuart Shaw. So here's another example of what happens when you demonstrate against your students versus what happens in reality. And lastly, let's look at the incident which perhaps is the most famous case of a chi master got beaten by a non-believer in the Western public. Right? This happened in Japan. There's an Aikido master who, from this video you can see he also able to fake students at distance.
真下飛んでます。早速これは
こんだけさ生徒がいるんだ。
そうそこが
すごいんだ。
ですよ。これでね今出ましたね。必殺の糸巻き糸巻き攻撃糸巻き出ましたね。逆回転もあるんだなこれ。
And you can see some of those reactions are very exaggerated. And this guy, just like Yanfang, right, also believes that he has genuine psychic power or telekinesis or whatever else, chi power or whatever he calls it. So he actually put up, I think it was $5,000 to challenge any MMA fighter in Japan. Meaning that he'll put up the money, and if someone beat him, they can take the money. And one MMA guy took him up on the offer, and here is what happened on the day. But this video you can see that he went into the fight believing in his chi power, but upon trying to do something initially, he realized that the guy is not reacting to it at all. And the guy was also a little worried at the beginning. You can see that as he first engaged, when he did something, the guy actually jumped back. He was expecting something to happen, and nothing happened, and therefore he proceeded on beating him in the face. And I believe the old master lost a tooth or two. So here's another example of how chi power fails them against non-believers in a non-compliant, resistant manner of context. Right, so after watching all this evidence, right, if you still believe that your own master chi power is a real one that works on everyone, well then believe whatever you want. You are entitled to, just like the flat earther believes the earth is flat, and Scientologists believe that there are secret lizard people, aliens that are trying to invade us. You can believe whatever you want, but for the rest of you who were unsure of which side the apple or the ball falls, I hope that this video will convince you that these phenomena, while they are real to certain people who can feel them, they are not universal, and therefore they are not an actual force that can be applied in a martial context. And to conclude, the theme of this video is about exploring the limitation of science, which we've talked about. In physics, there are limitations, but none of those things affect our everyday life, and does not affect what we can do in martial art. Everything we're doing in martial art falls well in the boundary of classical physics. Then even reach special or general relativity, never mind string theory, quantum mechanics, all of that, it doesn't fall into those. And in the realm of classical physics, everything is pretty well understood. If one day in the future a new Einstein comes along and changes the way we perceive gravity and perceive other things, all that does, it changes the fundamental principle behind it. It doesn't change the phenomenon or the effect of classical physics that we experience from day to day. That part is pretty much set in stone, as far as we can tell. So next time when someone tells you that chi power or any other magical Chinese martial art force cannot be expanded with science because science is limited, you should explain to them that science is only limited in frontier areas, and Chinese martial art does not fall into that area. And like I've said already, internal martial art does have certain biomechanical qualities that external practitioners or modern combat sports might not be fully aware of, and therefore their scientific method of training is different to how internal martial art train. For example, opening of the shoulder joint, opening of the hip joint, extension of the various joints to be able to make the body more resistant in various joint lock situations, like I've shown in my previous video where I replicated some of the demos other chi masters are doing. So those are real mechanics that people don't really look into, because internal martial art has been very secretive for for generation, right? As you can see, even today, these people who are able to do them don't even tell their student what actually happened. They tell them that it's chi power. So obviously, so these mechanics are sort of hidden from the general public and from the scientific people who does external martial art and combat sport. But my point is, none of these things does obey the actual law of physics, okay, that we understand today. And if in the law of physics there are no such thing as a chi force, then there are no chi force, okay, it doesn't exist. That is my point. So I'm not saying that the modern scientific understanding of martial art training already include internal martial art, right? So there are things that they don't yet aware of, maybe. But what I'm saying is, whatever they can still discover from internal martial arts mechanics falls under the current understanding of physics laws. It does not disobey any of it. So going back to Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? So any kind of phenomenon you see of internal martial art, the real one that works on everyone, it's just a physical biomechanic in disguise that people don't know how it's done. But once you expose the mechanic behind it, it will most certainly fall into classical current understanding of physics and not some mystery realm of chi power or undiscovered force. Well, so that's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, please subscribe me on YouTube channel, and if you can support me on Patreon, that'll be greatly appreciated. And as usual, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. Your support are very much appreciated, especially during this pandemic where everyone's wallet is tighter than usual. And a special shout out to Aaron, who was a Patreon supporter of mine, who had some financial problems, and now he's back. Welcome back to my Patreon family. As usual, got any questions, suggestions for content, please message me anytime you want. And lastly, I'd like to wish my viewers to still stay safe out there. The pandemic is not over, second wave is coming, so keep yourself safe, wear masks, remain social distance unless you absolutely have to. So hope everyone will stay infection free until the vaccine has been produced, and if you unfortunately did contract the virus, I wish you a speedy recovery. So thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Art channel, and I'll see you next time.